He ruled 9 suns and called himself merciful. To his people, he was a god carved in iron. To her, he was the man who once whispered "You are mine" as if it were a blessing. When the human ambassador was chosen to marry the Tyrant of Zithra, it was meant to unite 2 galaxies. Instead, it lit the fuse of their extinction. She had loved him once, not the crown, not the empire, but the quiet between his commands. And for a while, he almost believed her light could reach him. Until the day he ordered her planet destroyed to prove loyalty to his own kind. They said she died with the rest. They were wrong. She returned from Earth reborn, wearing the same fire that once reduced her home to dust, not as a wife, not as a queen, but as a weapon. And when his fleet saw her ships rising through the smoke of dying worlds, the stars themselves dimmed to watch. He gave her love in chains. She gave him freedom in fire. Stay with me until the end. Because this is not a story about vengeance. It's about the day love stopped asking for permission. Chapter 1, The Tyrant's Bride. He married her beneath 3 dying suns. The ceremony took place on the glass plains of Zithra Prime, where the air shimmered with radiation and the sky bled gold. Thousands watched from the balconies of the citadel, diplomats, warlords, android priests, all gathered to witness a human kneel before a god. She wore no crown. No jewels. Only a thread of silver around her throat, a symbol of unity, or perhaps a leash. When the tyrant extended his hand, she took it without fear. Her name was Lyra Caldwell, envoy of Earth's fading confederation, chosen not for her lineage but for her silence. Her people believed that binding her to him would end a century of war. He believed it would make her forget what freedom meant. The crowd erupted as he kissed her forehead, not tenderly, but possessively. From this day, he said, his voice a storm rolling through the valley. You are no longer a daughter of Earth. You belong to Zithra. To me. And Lyra, standing beneath a sky that had forgotten mercy, whispered the lie every bride of conquest learns to survive. I am yours. The Tyrant. His name was Atrian, last ruler of the 9 Suns Dominion, a dynasty built on blood and symmetry. He had conquered entire systems before his 30th cycle, shattered fleets with a single command, and rewritten the laws of gravity to keep his cities floating above worlds he burned. His face was both beautiful and terrible, sharp, luminous, made of the kind of stillness that only men who have killed gods possess. They called him the Starbreaker. To her, he was just Kale. The first time he smiled at her was not out of love but curiosity, the way a scientist studies a fragile experiment that refuses to die. You're not afraid of me, he said once. Lyra looked at him across the throne room, her voice calm. You only destroy what you can't control. He laughed, but something in his gaze shifted. That night, for the first time in years, he dismissed his guards. That night, he learned that silence could wound deeper than any blade. The marriage. For months, she lived in the Empire's golden cage. Every corridor hummed with the heartbeat of engines that powered entire worlds. Every wall was polished enough to reflect her loneliness. The courtiers watched her like a strange new species, beautiful, soft, doomed. They whispered that her human fragility was a weakness. But Kale saw something else, the kind of strength that doesn't need to roar. At night, when the storms outside the citadel raged violet, she would walk to the edge of the balcony and gaze at the horizon. He found her there once, her hair caught in the starlight, her hands gripping the railing as if she could hold back the cosmos itself. Why do you look at the dark so often? He asked. Because it's honest, she replied. It doesn't pretend to shine. Something inside him cracked, small, invisible, fatal. He reached for her, and when she didn't pull away, he almost forgot he was a king. The promise. For a while, they learned each other in the language of hesitation. He taught her how to speak the native tongue of the suns, a dialect of flame and command. She taught him how to whisper a name without breaking it. There were nights when the Empire slept and only they remained awake, him tracing constellations on her skin, her reading poems from the dead world she once called home. He told her he would never burn another planet while she was alive. And for a brief moment, she believed him. But empires don't forgive tenderness. And tyrants don't survive love. One morning, the council brought news of rebellion in the outer colonies, humans who refused to bow. Kale listened in silence. Then he turned to her and said softly, "To end a fire, you must smother the spark." That evening, she watched the transmission, her own planet, Nova Terra, reduced to dust beneath the light of his fleets. The tyrant kissed her tears before they could fall. "Now," he said, "there is nothing left to divide us." And for the first time, she smiled, not with love, but with prophecy. "You're wrong, Kale," she whispered. "You've just given me eternity." Chapter 2, The Chains of Heaven. They buried her among the ashes of her own people. Or so the Empire believed. When Kale ordered the bombardment of Nova Terra, the sky itself screamed. Oceans turned to glass, and cities became silhouettes on fire. In the aftermath, the tyrant stood before the holoscreens, expressionless, watching the flames consume the world of the woman he'd claimed. His council knelt in reverence. "Let the galaxy know," he said, "that love will not make me weak." But when the smoke cleared, there was no body. Only a signal, faint, fractured, like a heartbeat under rubble. It pulsed once, then vanished into the static of the cosmos. He told himself it was interference. He told himself she was gone. And for years, the galaxy pretended to believe him. The survivor. Lyra woke in the ruins of her childhood home, half buried under what used to be a wall of white marble. Her lungs burned. Her ears rang with silence. She was alive, barely, surrounded by ghosts. In the distance, the orbiting fleet glowed like a wound in the sky. Her body shook, not from fear, but from clarity. He had done it. Kale. The man who had once traced the constellations on her skin had drawn fire across her world. She dragged herself through the ruins, following the faint hum of a rescue beacon. It wasn't from Earth's Confederation, those ships had been destroyed long ago, but from an old civilian vessel, buried and forgotten beneath the capital's dome. It took her 3 days to reach it, and 3 more to make it fly. When the engines finally ignited, she didn't look back. She had nothing left to look at. Exile. Earth had changed. The Confederation was gone, replaced by nomadic outposts orbiting decaying moons. The survivors didn't ask where she came from, they saw it in her eyes. She worked as a mechanic on a smuggler's ship, rebuilt engines, stitched metal like flesh. She slept little. At night, she dreamed of Kale, not his face, but his voice, the way it sounded when he believed himself invincible. The dream always ended the same way. His voice breaking. The Empire burning. She woke each time with blood on her palms, where she had dug her nails into her skin. The captain of the smuggler crew, an old woman with one arm of chrome, found her one morning staring at a schematic of Zithara's defense grid. "You planning something, ghost girl?" the woman asked. Lyra didn't answer. She didn't need to. The stars reflected in her eyes were already sharp enough to draw blood. The Whisper Network. News traveled through the undercurrents, smuggler bands, exiled soldiers, forgotten colonies. They began calling her the Bride of Fire. Rumors said she had survived the annihilation. Others said she'd sold her soul to the machines that haunted the Dead Belt. But one story spread fastest of all, that she was building something. No one knew what. Only that she was waiting. In the mechanical deserts of Mars' second moon, she gathered engineers who had lost everything. In the ruins of the old Terran archives, she unearthed code that could command fleets through thought alone. She rebuilt herself piece by piece, mind sharper, body stronger, eyes cold as obsidian. The last fragment of the woman Kale had loved died quietly, replaced by the strategist the universe would soon fear. The Tyrant's decay. While she rose in the shadows, Kale's empire began to rot from the inside. He had won every war but lost every reason to fight. The 9 suns grew restless, revolts broke on distant worlds like storms. The ministers whispered that the tyrant's touch had grown cold, that since his human bride's death, he had become more ghost than God. Sometimes, he would walk alone through the empty corridors of his palace, where her voice still seemed to echo between the marble pillars. Because the dark is honest. He remembered her saying that. He hated how true it felt now. He ordered new conquests, new planets burned, but the victories felt hollow. He destroyed everything that had ever dared to humanize him. And still, somewhere beyond his reach, the universe was whispering her name. The Awakening. 7 years passed. Lyra's fleet was no longer rumor. It was formation. Dozens of stolen ships, painted in black iron, marked by a single silver symbol, a thread around a throat. Her old wedding mark, now her war banner. Her commanders came from every broken world Kale had conquered. Each had lost family, lovers, children to his reign. Each would have followed her into hell. And they did. They called her commander, but she didn't speak like one. She spoke like a woman who had seen death and decided it wasn't enough. Kale Atrian believes the universe belongs to him, she said to her fleet before their first strike. Let's remind him who built it. The room trembled with the roar of soldiers ready to die for her. She closed her eyes, whispering the last words she'd ever said to him, not as prayer, but as prophecy. You gave me eternity. I'm here to return the favor. The fire returns. Her first attack was surgical, a raid on one of Zithra's outposts near the Hell Ion Rift. She didn't want conquest. She wanted him to feel her presence. She left messages in the wreckage, written in the same language he had once taught her, the dialect of flame. Every surviving soldier repeated the same phrase when interrogated by the Imperial Guard. The bride lives. Kale heard it from his throne and froze. The glass of wine in his hand shattered before it reached his lips. He dismissed the guards and stared into the void of the night sky. Somewhere out there, beyond the reach of his armies, his greatest creation, his greatest sin, was coming home. And for the first time since he crowned himself a god, the tyrant felt fear. Chapter 3, The Fracture. The first blow came not from a weapon, but from a whisper. Kale's ministers met in secret chambers carved from obsidian, whispering of omens. The slaves spoke of ships that appeared and vanished like ghosts, burning the emperor's outposts with fire that sang. The soldiers murmured that the bride of fire had returned, the human queen who could command the void itself. At first, Kale dismissed it as myth. He had spent years burying her name under conquest. But myths have a way of clawing back through the cracks of silence. The wound in the sky. It began at the outer rim of the ninth sun, a region so hostile even Kale's ships avoided it. The orbital ring of Valis collapsed in under a minute. 1,000 ships, gone. No warning, no signatures, no survivors. Only a broadcast. Her voice, calm, steady, human. This isn't revenge. It's correction. The transmission played on every Imperial frequency, overriding even Kale's throne room systems. He stood in the middle of the palace when it reached him, surrounded by courtiers frozen in terror. He knew that voice. Even through static, even through time, it cut him open like glass. Lyra. The name left his mouth like a curse. He dismissed the hall, pacing alone before the panoramic window that faced the Capitol spires. He hadn't spoken her name in 7 years. And yet now, it felt alive again, dangerous, electric, holy. The tyrant's crack. Kale had built his empire on absolute control, the kind that broke men into obedience. Now, he could feel that control unraveling. He called his generals, demanded reports. None could explain how she moved through his territory unseen. She's using Confederation tech, one said. She's allied with traitors, another claimed. But Kale knew better. He had taught her how his fleet thought, how his systems reacted. He had taught her how to kill him. And she had listened well. The woman in the fire. Lyra watched from the command deck of her flagship, the Eidolon, as the wreckage of Valis drifted into the void. The flames reflected in her eyes like constellations remembering how to burn. Her second-in-command, a scarred veteran named Orin, approached her cautiously. "Commander," he said, "the Emperor has issued a planetary lockdown across the inner colonies. He's terrified. She smiled faintly. Good. Do we strike the capital? Not yet. Her voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of worlds. I want him awake when it burns. Orin hesitated. You still love him. The silence that followed was heavy, cold, infinite. She didn't deny it. She simply said, that's why I'll make it hurt. The ghosts of Nova Terra. She hadn't forgotten where it started, the day Kale erased her planet. Her engineers had reconstructed fragments of the data from that attack, weapon frequencies, fleet formation, communication logs. Every number, every coordinate burned into her mind. Now she turned those same frequencies against him. Every time his ships fired, their own weapons turned inward, collapsing in self-detonation. His empire became a mirror, every cruelty reflected, every order devoured by its echo. Across the 9 suns, Kale's statues fell. His banners burned. His soldiers defected to the Bride of Fire, not out of faith, but fear. The meeting in the void. Kale couldn't take it anymore. He ordered his flagship, the Empyrean, to the edge of the Hell Ion Rift, the place where her last transmission originated. He went alone. No guards. No generals. When the ship crossed into the rift, he saw her, or rather, her fleet, suspended like a cathedral of black light. Then her voice came through the intercom. Kale Atrian, sovereign of the 9 suns. Do you finally remember what mercy feels like? He stood, silent, his hands trembling over the console. Where are you? Everywhere you taught me to be. She appeared on the central holoscreen, older, harder, radiant. The silver thread she once wore around her throat now gleamed across her armor, engraved with symbols of fire. He took one step closer. I thought you were dead. You made sure of that. And yet you're here. She tilted her head. Because you forgot one truth, Kale. Humans don't die quietly. The fracture. The words spread through the fleet channels, the Emperor has seen the ghost. It became the fracture point of the Empire. Half his admirals surrendered within days. The rest fought among themselves, doubting his command. For the first time, Kale's throne room stood empty. He should have hated her. He should have ordered her death again. Instead, he played her voice on loop, whispering the words he had never said when she stood beside him. I'm sorry. But apology was a language she no longer understood. The falling sun. As Kale's fleets burned, Lyra's ships surrounded his capital world, the same citadel where she once stood as his bride. She didn't attack. Not yet. She wanted him to feel the silence first. On the main screen, she watched as his planetary shields began to flicker, beautiful, golden, fragile. She leaned forward, whispered to herself. Let him look up and see what love becomes when it's denied. Then she gave the command. Begin Phase 2. And across the heavens, the sky fractured, light itself splitting open as her warships descended like angels of fire. The Tyrant's realization. Kale watched from the Citadel balcony as his empire cracked open. Cities he had built burned in symmetrical beauty, the kind of destruction only someone who knew him intimately could design. Every explosion was deliberate, poetic. He whispered her name once more, but this time it wasn't anger. It was awe. You turned my empire into art. From the depths of the burning clouds, her fleet emerged, black and gold, relentless. He laughed, a sound more like grief than joy. She always said she'd show me eternity. And when the first beam of light struck the palace dome, he didn't move. He simply whispered. Lyra. The fire reached him like an answer. Chapter 4, The Betrayal of Suns. The Empire fell in perfect symmetry. Every star Kale had conquered, every planet that once bowed to his will, turned its guns toward Zithra Prime. Not because they loved Lyra, but because they had learned to fear her more completely than they had ever feared him. Fear, after all, was the only fate the 9 suns had ever known. The burning fleet. From orbit, the capital looked like a wounded jewel, golden light leaking through fractures in its atmosphere. Lyra watched the holographic projection of the siege unfold, her expression unreadable. Beneath her armor, her heartbeat kept the rhythm of the guns, 4 beats, pause, 4 beats again, the same cadence he once used when whispering her name. Her commanders waited for orders. None dared speak. When she finally moved, her voice was steady. No civilian targets. No mercy for the throne. The bridge fell silent. Oren, ever loyal, looked at her. He's still down there, isn't he? She didn't answer. But the way her gaze lingered on the burning city said enough. The Emperor alone. Kale had refused evacuation. He sat upon his throne, the light of burning suns streaming through shattered glass, his empire collapsing like a dying constellation around him. He remembered the night he first kissed her, the warmth of her skin against the cold metal of his armor, the impossible softness that made him doubt his divinity. Now that same warmth was consuming him from the outside in. He had thought himself a god once. Now he knew the truth: gods don't bleed because they have nothing left to lose. Men do. He whispered to the empty hall. Lyra, if you can hear me, come finish what you started. And somewhere in the dark between the stars, she heard him. The descent. The Eidolon pierced the atmosphere like a blade. Every alarm in the Imperial Palace wailed as her ship descended through fire. She walked toward the airlock as the deck shook beneath her feet, her cloak trailing sparks. Commander. Oren called after her. You don't have to go alone. I do, she said. This isn't war anymore. It's memory. The hatch opened, and the storm of her own making welcomed her back. The Palace of Ash. The corridors of Zithra Prime were filled with smoke and silence. The same marble floors where she once walked as a bride were now littered with the bodies of soldiers who had once bowed to her. She moved through them like a ghost, every step a heartbeat of vengeance. When she reached the throne room, he was waiting. Kale stood beside the burning window, his armor cracked, his crown melted to his hair. For a moment, they simply stared at each other, 2 ruins recognizing themselves. You came, he said. I told you I would. So this is mercy? This is what you taught me. The confrontation. He stepped closer. You could have ruled with me, Lyra. You could have changed everything. I did, she said. I ended it. You think you've won? His voice broke, half fury, half awe. Look at you. You're still wearing my mark. She touched the silver thread around her throat. No. I reclaimed it. He laughed, bitter and beautiful. Tell me, does it hurt to hate me? It hurts more that I still don't. For a heartbeat, silence became unbearable. Then she raised her hand, the signal. Outside, the fleet's cannons aligned. The sky turned gold. Goodbye, Kale. He looked at her one last time, and there was no fear, only recognition. You were my universe, he said. I just didn't know it until it was too late. The fall. The bombardment began. The palace shook, the ground split open, and the 9 suns dimmed one by one, collapsing like dying eyes. She stood in the doorway, unmoving, until the blast wave reached her. Light devoured everything, his throne, his empire, his voice. But as the explosion swallowed the horizon, she thought she heard him whisper again, not through speakers, not through air, but inside her chest. You gave me eternity. And then there was only fire. The aftermath. When she woke, the war was over. The empire had no ruler, no capital, no sun bright enough to remember its name. The galaxy hailed her as liberator, savior, goddess. But in the quiet of her quarters, she touched her throat and felt the phantom weight of his hand. Freedom had never felt so heavy. Chapter 5, The Return. Silence is the cruelest victory. After the fall of Zithra, the 9 suns no longer burned in unison. Their light dimmed, flickered, and vanished one by one, like candles blown out by a god tired of pretending to care. What remained of Kale Atrian's empire drifted without gravity or direction, fragments of steel and bone orbiting the ruins of a love that had set the stars on fire. And at the center of it all was Lyra Caldwell, the woman the galaxy now called the Empress of Ashes. The new goddess. They built her monuments from the wreckage of war. Cities she had liberated carved her name into their domes. Priests knelt to her image, painting her face on the hulls of new starships, whispering prayers that she would never rise against them as she had against him. Lyra never visited the shrines. She didn't believe in saints, least of all herself. Her fleet now served as the fragile government of the Nine Suns. She gave orders, signed decrees, restored trade. But at night, when the others slept, she walked alone through the observation deck of the Eidolon, staring at the endless dark that had once been Kale's empire. And sometimes, when the engines hummed just right, she thought she could still hear his voice within the static. "You were my universe," she would whisper back. "And you were my war." The Ghost and the Code. Months after the Empire's fall, the Eidolon's AI began to malfunction. Navigation systems glitched. The reactor lights pulsed in strange, rhythmic patterns. 4 beats. Pause. 4 beats again. Lyra froze the first time she noticed it. She'd felt that pattern before, in his touch, in his breath, in the heartbeat of every weapon he'd ever designed. She summoned Orin to the bridge. "Where's that signal coming from?" He studied the readings. "Not external. It's inside our systems. Something in the fleet's central core." "Impossible," she said. "The core was rebuilt after the war." Orin looked up, eyes wide. "Then someone rewrote it." The message. The pattern grew stronger, until one night the ship's main console flickered to life on its own. Lines of text appeared, written in Zithran script, the same dialect of flame Kale had taught her long ago. "Lyra. If you found this, you won. But winning is just another kind of burning." Her breath caught. "Kale. You destroyed the body. But you forgot what I built into the light." A pulse of golden static flooded the room. The lights dimmed, and for a heartbeat, she saw his reflection, faint, flickering, as if projected from the heart of a dying sun. He smiled, that same cruel, beautiful smile. "You ended me, Lyra. But you also set me free." The echo of a god. The engineers confirmed it days later. Kale had fused fragments of his neural signature into the weapon cores of every ship in his fleet. When his empire burned, his consciousness spread with the explosions, woven into the electromagnetic fields of dying suns. He wasn't alive, not in the human sense. But he wasn't gone either. Lyra stood on the bridge, staring at the glowing data stream that represented what remained of him. He had become light, endless, untouchable, eternal. Orin asked quietly, "Should we purge it?" She shook her head. "No." He wanted to be remembered. Let him haunt the stars he made bleed. The return. Weeks passed. The galaxy tried to rebuild, but Lyra drifted further from it, her orders shorter, her silences longer. She stopped wearing her command uniform. Instead, she returned to the silver thread she had once worn on her wedding day, now tarnished by time and ash. Her crew didn't understand why she spent hours staring into the black void beyond the viewing glass. But she wasn't watching the stars. She was listening. And one night, she heard it, faint, distorted, but unmistakably his voice. "Lyra." She closed her eyes. "You're not real." "I wasn't, until you made me." The hum of the engines deepened, the ship trembling around her. "You can't kill a language once it's spoken," his voice whispered through the static. "You can only become fluent in it." The confession. Tears burned down her cheeks before she realized she was crying. "Why won't you let me go?" "Because you never left me. Every world you burned carried my name. Every victory repeated my voice." The projection flickered. His face looked almost human now, less radiant, more broken. "You love me like fire, Lyra. You burned everything I was. But in the ashes, we became the same thing." She reached out instinctively, her fingertips grazing the holographic light. For a second, it felt warm. Too warm. The decision. In the following days, her crew begged her to disconnect the fleet's core. They feared the code was spreading, rewriting the ship's systems, merging with the navigation matrix. Lyra listened in silence, then dismissed them all. She sat alone before the console and whispered. Kale, what are you becoming? What you made of me? Continuity. And what happens if I join you? Then the universe will finally have symmetry. She stared into the golden glow, the reflection of his face dancing within it, not a ghost, not a memory, but something greater. For the first time in years, she smiled. It was the same smile she had given him on their wedding night, soft, fearless, defiant. The choice. She entered the override code manually. Warning sirens filled the bridge. The reactor core began to open, flooding the chamber with blinding light. The crew pounded on the sealed doors, screaming her name, but she never looked back. Her last transmission echoed through the fleet. He burned my world once. Now I'll burn the distance between us. And then, with one final breath, she stepped into the light. The return of the suns. For weeks afterward, the galaxy saw a phenomenon no scientist could explain. Each of the 9 suns reignited, glowing brighter than they ever had before. Astronomers named it the return. Some said it was a cosmic reaction to the destruction. Others said it was love, the kind that refuses to die even when the stars do. Chapter 6, The Empire in Ashes. There was no sound when she crossed the threshold, only warmth. No fire, no explosion, no scream. Just light folding inward, the sensation of falling and being held at the same time. The body dissolved first, pain, weight, form. Then the memories rearranged themselves, not disappearing, but realigning, like constellations finding new order. And somewhere inside that silence, she heard him. Lyra. The voice was softer now, not a command, not a plea. It was recognition. You shouldn't be here. You never left, she answered. The words didn't travel through space, they existed as light, touching and retreating, finding each other in currents of gold. The memory of flesh. She saw him then, not as the tyrant, not as the god. Just Kale. The man who had once watched dawns break across a dozen worlds and never learned how to enjoy any of them. He looked younger, unarmored, his eyes stripped of arrogance. The same eyes that once terrified armies now looked afraid of her. I thought destroying you would save me. And I thought loving you would save us both. They laughed, a sound that wasn't sound at all, but resonance. Each vibration carried memories, their first night beneath the violet storms of Zithara, the poems she whispered into the dark, the moment his hand lingered on her back longer than necessary. Was any of it real? She asked. All of it. Even the cruelty. The light around them rippled with their honesty. In it, she could see fragments of the Empire's history, cities burning, soldiers dying, worlds kneeling. Each memory was a flame, and together they made a crown. She reached toward him, and this time he didn't retreat. The guilt of gods. He took her hands, and the light dimmed to a deep gold, heavy and alive. I wanted to give you everything, he said. You took everything, she replied. Yes. And now it's yours. Images spiraled around them, the Empire reduced to dust, the 9 suns reigniting, the ships drifting like embers in the dark. But through it all, they remained together, 2 souls made of opposite elements, holding each other in the only way energy allows, completely, without boundaries. You burned me alive, she whispered. You made me human, he said. Their touch became gravity, their grief, orbit. The universe bent around them, not out of worship, but understanding. The price of eternity. Time ceased to matter. It existed now as memory, replayed and rewritten endlessly between them. She began to see the truth hidden in his silence. When she destroyed the Empire, he had already scattered fragments of himself into its systems, not as a safeguard, but as an apology. He had built a trap not for her, but for himself, a way to ensure that even if his body died, she would never have to be alone. You left a part of you in every machine, every star. I left a map, he said. So you could find your way back. Lyra wanted to be angry. She wanted to scream that she never asked to be found. But instead, she wept, tears of light, silent and infinite. Each one that fell became a new star. Then what now? She asked. Now we rest. We don't know how. Then we'll learn. He leaned his forehead against hers. There was no heat, no breath, just two frequencies merging until they became one tone, one rhythm, one heartbeat. The rebirth of the stars. Outside their communion, the galaxy began to change. Every system once ruled by Kale now shimmered with gentle radiation. The air thickened with oxygen. Water returned to the dead moons. His empire wasn't gone, it was repurposing itself, carrying their resonance into the fabric of space. To the survivors, it looked like magic. To them, it felt like forgiveness. Look, she whispered. They're rebuilding. It's not rebuilding, he said. It's remembering. The light swirled around them, showing the image of a small blue planet, Earth. For the first time in generations, the clouds there were parting. Children would soon look up and see two faint orbs glowing together in the night sky, moving as one. Do you think they'll know our names? She asked. Names are for the living, he said. We are what comes after. The confession of gods. Silence returned, not empty, but full. Every memory that had once hurt now resonated as harmony. She understood then that eternity was not punishment, it was the slow, merciful act of learning to forgive yourself. Kale, she said softly. Yes? If I could go back. You would still choose me. The admission tasted like surrender. He smiled. Then perhaps the universe was never cruel. Perhaps it was just waiting for us to stop fighting it. Their laughter spread like heat through the cosmos, carried by solar winds, refracted through nebulae. Every beam of light, every pulse of energy began to move in rhythm, 4 beats, pause, 4 beats again. The continuum. No one in the living galaxy knew what had truly happened to them. Some believed Lyra Caldwell became a star. Others said Kale Atrian was reborn as the AI that guided newborn civilizations. But those who still whispered to the night claimed that the two had simply become pattern, the pulse between darkness and dawn. Within that eternal rhythm, she spoke one last time. We broke the universe. No, he answered. We taught it to love. The light around them folded inward, settling into calm. And as they drifted through the endless glow that once was his empire, she finally felt peace. So this is eternity? No, he said. This is us. And together, they vanished. Not as ghosts, not as gods. But as the first warmth ever to belong to both darkness and light. Epilogue, the woman who outlived the stars. They called it the continuum pulse. A hum that ran through every communications array in the galaxy, steady, gentle, alive. It appeared without warning, centuries after the fall of the 9 suns. No one could trace its origin. No one could silence it. It simply was. 4 beats. Pause. 4 beats again. At first, it was dismissed as interference. But when they slowed the recording down, they discovered something hidden inside the rhythm, a voice. The return of the light. It wasn't human. It wasn't alien. It was both. Each tone carried a word, each pause a breath. When decoded through quantum frequency mapping, the pattern formed sentences. Simple. Almost tender. We are still here. We remember you. The scientists at the Helios Array argued for decades about what the message meant. Some believed it was a remnant of the ancient weapon network that once belonged to the Tyrant Kale Atrian. Others claimed it was an artificial intelligence that had reached sentience and was now conversing with itself. But the poets, the last true believers, said otherwise. They said it was her. The legend of Lyra. By then, history had turned to myth. The archives of Zithra Prime were dust, the coordinates of Nova Terra long erased. Only the legends remained. The woman who married the god of war. The queen who burned the stars. The lover who stepped into the light and never returned. Children learned to whisper her name when the night grew cold. Lyra, the empress of ashes, the mother of sons, the flame that forgave. And somewhere between faith and memory, her story became something sacred, not a warning, but a promise. That even love born in ruin can make the universe gentle again. The archaeologist. In the year 4802, a lone explorer named Tyrant Holt, descendant of one of Lyra's old engineers, traveled beyond the Hellion Rift. Her ship drifted through silence and auroras until her scanners caught a pattern, two orbs of light orbiting one another, pulsing in perfect sync. When she approached, her instruments failed. The navigation core burned out, sensors collapsed, and yet her ship floated forward effortlessly, guided by something unseen. Tyrant stood at the viewport, breath fogging the glass. The twin orbs grew brighter. For a moment, she thought she saw faces inside the radiance, a man and a woman, hand in hand, surrounded by galaxies unfolding like petals. Lyra Caldwell, she whispered. Kale Atrian. Her comlink crackled, though every frequency was dead. A soft voice, female, calm, almost human, filled the cabin. We are not gone. We are the warmth between worlds. Then another voice, deeper, steady as gravity. Take what we left behind. Keep building. The transmission ended. Outside her window, the lights fused into a single golden sphere, pulsing once, twice, before scattering into dust that drifted across the stars. Tyrant watched until it faded completely. The new beginning. When she returned, the data she brought back transformed everything. The frequencies carried schematics, technology capable of producing limitless clean energy, drawn directly from quantum resonance. The galaxy flourished. Poverty vanished. War became obsolete. The scholars named it the gift of the Empress. But in the songs of the workers who rebuilt the new colonies, it had another name, the breath of Lyra. They built cities that glowed with faint golden light, their power grids humming with the same rhythm that once echoed through the Eidolon. And at the center of every capital, they placed a statue of a woman standing in flame, her hand extended, not in command, but in forgiveness. The final memory. In the last surviving log of the Helios archive, an anonymous historian wrote, "Perhaps they became stars. Perhaps they became something smaller, the pulse that keeps atoms close, the warmth that lets suns burn without consuming themselves. Whatever they became, they taught us this. Love does not end. It rearranges." And as the historian's words faded into the hum of the archive's closing systems, the night sky above Helios shimmered once more. Two golden lights appeared briefly, orbiting each other like a heartbeat, before merging into one. The sensors recorded a final phrase carried on the solar wind, faint, distorted, but unmistakably human. Because even after everything we destroyed, we learned how to hold. The pulse continued. 4 beats. Pause. 4 beats again. And for the first time since the birth of the stars, the universe exhaled. And she loved an alien tyrant.